Deva. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Hari Om Tat Sat. So Hare Krishna devotees, apologies for the audio. I'm not sure, little further away maybe it was not hearable. Anyway, so welcome all for ISKCON Seshadripuram's morning Srimad Bhagavatam class in this wonderful Purushottam month. We all know every activity of service gives us 1,000 times benefits. So grateful that I'm able to take part in this activity in this today's morning class. So it's like 1,000 times we have all heard and read Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's an amazing benefit we can't comprehend. Okay, how is it possible? Our material brain cannot understand beyond a point in time, but we need to simply accept what the acharyas are saying and then just go along in that direction, then we can be perfected. So let's read now this. Today I have been asked to take up 3rd canto, 6th chapter. 3rd canto, 6th chapter. It is entitled Creation of Universal Form. Is the audio now okay?
Yes, Prabhu. Now it is better.
No, it's better, but it's not up to full volume. I'm just complaining to the Sridhar. Prabhu told us, I don't know if it is a mic or what. Now, at least it's audible, but it's not loud.
Okay. Why it is?
Prabhu, if you are a bit away, it is low, and if you are coming close, then it is good.
I don't know. Let me.
Very clear, Prabhu. Very high.
You have to take one good mic, standing mic in front of you, Prabhu, like that way.
Generally, I think there is something wrong in the setting has gone.
Maybe.
And the Sridhar Prabhu's voice is very clear. Yours is also audible, but you have to pay a lot of attention. I cannot do any DT service with listening to you.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I think it should be okay.
I'm sorry. I'm complaining. Become a complaint.
No. Please.
Sorry, Prabhu.
The purpose
No,
of
forgive me.
all devotees thing.
Forgive me, Prabhuji.
No,
It's better now.
please.
Thank you.
The idea is for all of us to hear nicely.
No, it is okay.
It's better now. It's better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Now it should be okay.
Sorry,
Yes.
Prabhuji.
No,
Sorry
Mata,
for this.
please don't say that. It's my mistake.
No, it's not yours. It's my ears also like that. I can't hear very clearly. Thank you, Prabhuji.
So we will.
Prabhu, if you use the headphones, probably it might be very clear.
It is to do
Prabhu.
with the system. It has come down in the settings, in the Zoom settings.
Oh, okay.
Low here. I have now adjusted. It should be fine now.
No problem, Prabhu. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Okay. So now we will discuss chapter 6, creation of the universal form. The first half. So there are 40 verses in this chapter. So we will do 20 verses. I will take up the first verse. I will read the Sanskrit only for the first verse. Rest of it we will do the translation. Rishir uvacha iti tasam swasaktinam satinam asametya saha prashupta loka tantranam nishamya gatimishvaraha. Translation. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Rishi Maitreya said, the Lord thus heard about the suspension of the progressive creation functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies, such as the Mahat Tattva. So now this chapter is talking about a continuation of this, the primary creation. And in the previous chapter, which is entitled Vidhura's Talk with Maitreya, we heard from Maitreya Muni, along with, as he is talking to Vidhura Mahatma Vidhura, and he's explaining this section of this primary creation, and that section we would have actually heard that the demigods had sort of come to a point of halt, that nothing is moving. So they actually normally write it. That is the situation of all the living entities. Most of us sometimes don't realize that we need to be completely contemplating on the personality of Godhead for moving anything. Like, we have no power to move anything. So many times we think we are the doer, I am this, I have so much capabilities I can do. But without the sanction of the Lord, I can't even move my finger, or I can't even lift my hand, or why even the eyelid I cannot move. So the demigod situations are not different. So they are actually stuck. They are not able to move forward. They are actually created, but they are not able to move. So they are making this wonderful prayers to the Lord. So there were so many verses there which is glorifying the Lord, the glorification given by the demigods. After that, now this section is coming where the Lord thus heard about the suspension of the progressive creation functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies such as the Mahat Tattva. So now Prabhupada is writing, in the Lord's creation, there is nothing wanting. It's not like, okay, there is something wrong and therefore this creation cannot happen. It's not like that. But the point that we need to understand is, without the intervention of the Lord, nothing can happen. All the ingredients are perfectly available. So it's all manifested there, but it is still not become activated. There is like that. We have a nice phone here or a laptop here. It's all there, but it can function only when the necessary energy comes for it, right? The ingredients are all there nicely. So like this, without the Lord coming into each of these ingredients and energizing them, there is no question of any of these material things getting activated. So therefore, that spiritual spark is required to activate. But the higher, the source of all of that spiritual spark is the one which activates everything. So that is something which Prabhupada is discussing here. Then the next verse, the supreme powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements. So here the 23 elements Prabhupada is writing. I will read through them. The total material energy, false ego, sound, touch, form, taste, smell, earth, water, fire, air, sky, eyes, ear, nose, tongue, skin, hand, leg, evacuating organ, genitals, speech, and mind. So these are the 23 elements Prabhupada is referring to. And he's saying all of these needs to be combined, of course, with the will of the Lord. So the Lord actually decides to take up this function, and therefore he enters into each of these elements along with, here it is mentioned, goddess Kali. So she is basically the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada is writing, the Lord enters into all of these things, and in the combination of time, and he's saying this is actually called Kali, the energy of the Lord. And therefore we call her Mother Nature, right? We call Mother Nature, but ultimately it is the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now in that combination of the Lord entering into the every element along with Goddess Kali in the passage of time, that is how it is defined here. All are combined together by the influence of time and are again dissolved in the course of time. Time, therefore, is the energy of the Lord and acts in her own way by the direction of the Lord. This energy is called Kali and is represented by the dark, destructive goddess or goddess generally worshipped by the persons influenced by the mode of darkness or ignorance in the material existence. So this is the definition given by Prabhupada. So now with that, the elements are all actually activated as per this verse. Verse number 3. Thus, when the personality of Godhead entered into the elements by his energy, all the living entities were enlivened into different activities, just as one is engaged in his work after awakening from sleep. So, this is the example that when we are asleep, our consciousness is not literally visible for us, right? We are in a different world. But once we are awake, we are fully conscious in this body. Else, earlier we were in out of the body kind of a thing, right? Many of us dream of so many other things. But this body is sort of having minimum functions. So it is like kept an automatic mode of like when you put a phone in the power saving mode, right? Only a few of the things work. So like that, the body is put on a power saving mode, and then the soul actually goes off elsewhere. And that is why we are in different bodies experiencing so many things outside many a times. Like sometimes we are in horror, sometimes we are in pleasure. But then when we come back into this body, then the power saving mode is deactivated. Like that, here once the Lord actually comes into this, each of the elements, they completely become active and then they start functioning. And here Prabhupada is talking about how, this consciousness has to be used in the progression of the soul to go back to Godhead. So I will not get into the details now because we have 20 verses to cover. But that's how, actually, see, this primary creation, or for that matter, the secondary creation is a lot technical. While I'm not saying it is not important, because every word in Srimad Bhagavatam is important, we need to give complete due importance and not skip through. Okay, that's fine, let's move on. This is not something which we as devotees are interested in, but it is very important to know. But what Prabhupada does is, even within each of that technical details, he brings us to understand what is actually the purpose behind that. See, that is the greatness of Srila Prabhupada's commentary, or his complete focus on what is the purpose of all the Vedas, all the complicated, so many hundreds and thousands of literatures are there. But how to bring all of them to the core conclusion of what is life. Therefore, in Prabhupada, in just whatever, in that 11 years we can say, but within that, in how many years he took to write only Srimad Bhagavatam, he is bringing that focus into every verse there. So even though it is technical, Prabhupada is bringing us back to know why after all these things is happening. That's all fine, the technical details of, X, Y, Z, all that. But why? Why is it happening? Once we are able to understand that, then we can respect those technical details, but we should understand and go into why this is there. The purpose, Prabhupada is saying, is actually to quickly understand that I have sort of disengaged from Krishna when in my original state, and then I have tried to be independent of Krishna, and I have tried to think that I can enjoy myself without having the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result, the Lord is put into the trouble of having to create a illusion for us that I am independent, I am the doer and all that. And he's taking so much effort to create so difficult things, but for him it is not difficult. I spoke about this in yesterday's class also. I think I spoke about this in this English class. But that doesn't mean we trouble the Lord. Oh, it's easy for him, so let him do it for me. That should not be our mood. Oh, I am putting the Lord in trouble by, he has to take so much difficulties to do all this. This is where we understand, even though it's not difficult for him. Then he creates this universe. Okay, he doesn't give a small toy. He gives a fully functional one where we can completely think I am the master. So that is the perfection with which the Lord does things. And then our purpose is therefore to understand, oh, why am I troubling the Lord? And this is actually not a real state. I think I have been in an illusion and I need to get back to the original state. So the progress of that, the journey of that is what is this material world function. And therefore we need to come back to our original state. Reformation has to happen. Reformation of the heart has to happen, and then we need to go back to Godhead. So that is the important aspect in this verse. The next one, when the 23 principal elements were set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form, or the Vishwarupa body of the Lord, came into existence. So here the important point is, many people, particularly the impersonalists, think that the Vishwarupa is higher than the other incarnations of the Lord. Like, the Vishwarupa is the source, and from that everything comes. But this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly states the Vishwarupa is a byproduct or a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna shows that Vishwarupa. Prabhupada writes, it is not that from Vishwarupa Krishna came, from Krishna that Vishwarupa came. So that we need to understand, Vishwarupa is a plenary portion of the Lord, and it is a temporary manifestation. It is not that, it is beginningless. No. It has a beginning and it begins with the Lord entering into each of the elements. Otherwise, Vishwarupa is not there. It is a material thing. And Prabhupada writes, this Vishwarupa is actually none other than the Lord, but a material manifestation of the Lord. And he is actually giving us a simple example to say how we understand Vishwarupa. He says the deity in our temple is actually the material manifestation of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the deity is not different from the Lord, but it is a material manifestation. Similarly, the Vishwarupa is a mega. The deity we can comprehend within, it could be whatever, 5 feet to 20 feet or 50 feet or 100 feet deity. But this Vishwarupa is like maybe 1,000,000 times bigger than that. But the principally both are same. That is how we understand that. The next verse. As the Lord in his plenary portion entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into the gigantic form in which all the plenary system and all movable and immovable creations rest. That is the size of that Vishwarupa. They transformed into the gigantic form in which all the planetary systems, we know, right? There are these 14 planetary systems within one small universe. There are millions of universes like this. Just imagine the size of that Vishwarupa. We cannot even imagine. That's so big it is. The gigantic Vishwarupa, known as Hiranmaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him. So now that the Lord has activated, but then that doesn't mean that immediately the creation happened, the secondary creation happened. What happened after that is the Lord actually lied down. And all of these other ingredients, including the, all the demigods and all the other living entities, everybody were inside that body. And from the time this activation happened till the time the secondary creation happened, there was a period of 1,000 celestial years where the Lord was just being in his yoga nidra. He was enjoying. And all of them were also submerged in that yoga nidra. Then the next one, the total energy of the Mahat Tattva in the form of the gigantic Vishwarupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity, the self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. So this is nice, right? That one word, divided himself by himself. And that means there is no cause for what he is doing. He has to do for whatever happens, it is he only who happens, even if it is to do with himself. That is why we call him, right, Atma Rama. That means there is nothing that he needs from external thing. He can do everything. Therefore, he divided himself by himself. And then it is mentioned that he divided the 3 aspects of it, which is very important, into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity, and self-identification. So that has been nicely mentioned. The first one is the consciousness of living entities. That means we all know that, right? The consciousness is the symptom of the presence of the soul. So in that sense, that is the first portion which he divided. That means in the entire Mahat Tattva, the consciousness is given for the entity, living entity, to be active. That is one aspect of it. Then there are the other active things, which is like what the living soul, just being conscious, cannot be acting, right? It needs some kind of a vehicle to manage all of that. That is the second division, and that is called the life of activity. And Prabhupada is actually saying that whole process is working because of the 10 different airs that are working to keep this consciousness alive, like consciousness going. So that is the further detail, like just like we have this computer, but that is an external feature. But within that, there are so many different softwares which needs to make it work like that. So this body or this entire universe has got different layers of functioning, and each one of them are very intricately connected. As a result, the whole thing works as a system. None of it can work individually without the help of the other. So like how we also as devotees are we are all completely interconnected. Unless we are actually linking with each other in a nice mood of devotion, then there is no perfection in our devotional service. So that, not just here, in any aspect of the thing, nobody can think I am independent. We are a small unit within the larger unit. And if we are able to cooperate within that larger unit, then the whole thing works very nicely. That one small screw in the wheel, your car is there, you have a nice, beautiful wheel, alloy wheel, very beautifully designed, everything. But that small nut which is holding that alloy, if it falls off, our life is doomed, right? So everyone has to act very perfectly within that system. And that is something which we need to understand. Therefore, these 10 activities, we will describe that in the next verse also. The different airs that are there, the function of these different airs has been mentioned. And the last one is the self-identification. The 3 items. The first one is the consciousness of the living entities. The second one, the life of activity, which refers to the 10 airs within this body. And then the last one is the self-identification. And the self-identification is, Prabhupada is saying, there are further subdivided into 3, which we all know, which is Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautika, and Adi Devika. So the self-identification is also divided into these 3 categories of the body and mind. That means that individual identity is actually looking at it in terms of itself. So that is the third portion of it. So the consciousness, the 10 different airs, and then the identification of the soul within these 3 aspects of Adi Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautika, and Adi Devika. The next one, 8th verse. The gigantic universal form of the Supreme Lord is the first incarnation of plenary portion of the Super Soul. He is the self of an unlimited number of living entities, and in him rests the aggregate creation which thus flourishes. So this is the point. When you talk about the super soul, we also know the super soul is also only in the material world. While he's in our heart, when you go to the spiritual world, the super soul does not come with us. There, the original Lord is there. Then the super soul is just a manifestation for this material world. Now, the super soul's function, therefore, started in this material world. And who is the first person to have that super soul? He's saying the gigantic form. That means when the Lord entered into that gigantic form, that is where the super soul comes into being. Then further, from that gigantic form, into every minute atoms, including into each one of us, into each one of our bodies, into even to that ant, to that microorganism, everywhere that Lord enters as the super soul. So that is how he is aggregating, right? How he is able to control everything, because he is there in everything. He knows every small movement that is happening. We may not know what is happening inside this body, even though I call this my body. I don't know right now which acid is flowing where and what is getting digested. We know overall, okay, this is happening, but we do not know completely. But the Lord, because he is into every atom, he is able to understand what is happening within that particular atom, and he is in full control. Sometimes many people think, oh, the Lord is not in control, therefore these things are happening. Nothing is under that kind of understanding. Every small thing is under the complete control of the Lord. Nothing can be that he is not aware. Oh, the Lord did not know while this happened in the background. No. Sometimes when we read Bhagavatam, he will say, oh, these people are coming and praying. Oh, this is not functioning. Oh, my Lord. Then the Lord, oh, is it not functioning? He will say like that. That doesn't mean, oh, he doesn't know. He is fully conscious of everything. But that is his Leela. That, if he says, yes, I know, then the interest in the other person is lost, right? He is living in that moment, and the Lord allows that person to be in that moment, and he does not come and quickly interfere, right? Like when a child comes and tells you a nice story, right? Oh, that crow came and that put that thing inside. It is not that you don't know the story. Oh, you listen. Oh, is it? Oh, how did it happen? You ask like that. And then the child is very interested. He actually goes on telling more and more and more with all that. So in that process, he's growing, right? His memory is growing, his thinking is growing, everything. So while we know, we do not interrupt their eagerness in life. We are allowing them to flourish. Like that, the Lord also acts that part. It doesn't mean that he doesn't know. He simply playing along so that the soul can evolve in the process. While the soul is like here, if you see the demigods, they come and pray, make a long prayer, and in the process of the prayer, they will become self-realized. But the Lord, if he had said, oh yeah, I know, it's okay, let me do it, then there is no prayer, there is no opportunity for that soul to progress. So this is important. So the Lord listens through that and then makes them make them do the prayers. And then he actually tries to solve their problems. So that is there. The next one is the gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1 of the senses that he is the body and the mind and the senses. The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1 in the sense that he is the body and the mind and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy, and he is the one heart where life energy is generated. Here also the definition of 1, 10, and 3 are given. In this, the 3 is defined as the mind, body, and soul, and the 10 is defined by the 10 different airs, which we all know, right? When some of you may be doing the Sandhya Vandana and all that, you will be chanting this, just trying to get that. So the 10 airs, which are actually called as prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. So these are actually the primary 5 are the primary ones: prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. These are actually, right, the prana is the life air, and then there is an air which is in the throat, which actually if it is not there, we will be choked to death. That is one air. Then there is one air which is actually helping in the digestion. So for example, when you are taking prasadam, you find that burp coming, right? That is the air which is actually in the stomach, which is actually managing the digestion process. So that air is separate. So, and there are these other air which are pervaded all over the veins of our body. So these are the primary 5 ones. But beyond that, there are another 5 which is called Naga, Kurma, Krikara, Devadatta, and Dhananjaya, like the air which passes out of the body, that is one. Like this, there are the various classifications are given. So that is the again the 10 elements. The first one we saw, the 3, which is basically the senses, mind, and body. Then the 10 refers to these 10 different airs, and lastly the 1, which refers to the that is basically the soul. He's saying, no, he is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life, and he is the one heart where life energy is generated. So that 1 refers to the heart. From there, everything is activated. All these airs actually come from that heart, is what here it has been Prabhupada is writing. And that is the seat of power. Therefore, if you see the super soul, right, he is also seated in the region of the heart, it is mentioned. And from him, the power comes to the heart, from the material aspect of the heart. And from there, all the other aspects, including these airs, are generated. And they actually control this physical body. So this is the science, very technical. How we understand this is understanding through the Bhagavatam. And right now, our science is not there to ability to prove it. But in course of time, we will get there. There is no question that, this is not science. This is perfect science. Science is actually discovering what is already there. It is not that science, like even before we knew, the apple was still falling, right? The gravitational force is there. It is not that science does not exist. We call it, once we know about it, we call it science, but science is always there. Like this entire process of how this subtle to gross, how the transformation happens from the subtle, from the air, from the water, how it becomes grosser and grosser and grosser, and we are able to see. That process is there, and that science is like we are in an elementary stage from as far as the material science is concerned. But we will try to understand in course of time. People say, right, the scientist, tomorrow we will do that. So maybe tomorrow we will do that, but we cannot wait. we have a very short life, so we need to move on. And already everything is there in Bhagavatam. All we need to do is just follow Srimad Bhagavatam. I think I need to finish in another 5-7 minutes time. I will do that. Because today it was supposed to be a short class, I was told. Okay, so the 10th verse, the Supreme Lord is the super soul of all the demigods entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding. So that is the extension of what we already discussed. The Lord, because they are requesting, and he is the super soul, he has to activate it, and therefore he's because that the living entities are desiring, the Lord is merciful and he's doing this. That is how we understand that. Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." So now is going to happen, the different parts of the body are going to be created. So now we know these demigods are actually the deities who are governing these different aspects. So now one by one we will see how each part is created and how that deity took charge. Like, you create an office, a ministry in charge, then that person who's going to be the minister for that department is come and he takes oath. On Bhagavad Gita, I take oath. And then from that day, he is in charge and he manages that affairs. Similarly, here we will see each activity is going to be created, and then one person is put in charge of that. Agni or heat separated from his mouth, and all the directors of the material affairs entered into their respective position. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. So he creates that mouth, and then he puts Agni Dev as in charge of that mouth, and subsequently the person is able to run the show. Like, okay, that individual separate unit, they can function now. And, these are the managers, the Agni or heat, he is the manager. Second one, when the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of air in the plenary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. So Varuna in charge of that, then that portion gets activated. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper position. And because of this, the living entity can smell the aromas of everything. So Ashwini Kumaras in charge of the smell, they entered the nostrils of that universal form, and immediately they get activated. But understand, by them entering, it cannot function. The Lord has to be there as the primary power behind these Ashwini Kumars. That also happened. You will see that later in the 6th canto, that it is there. Just by them entering, Brahma is intelligence. But when he enters, that doesn't mean that our intelligence will get activated. That Paramatma has to be inside. Only then Brahma's intelligence can actually flourish. So that is there. Then next, therefore, thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms. So now the eyes have been manifested. Next, when there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entity can realize tactile knowledge. That means the form of touch, the sense of touch formed, and Anila is in charge of that. When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles, by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. We know, no? Shravanam. So this is very important. Only with this Shravanam we can go back to garden. Not only the main thing which can help us to go back is Shravanam. So 18. When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of sensations and their different parts entered into them, and thus the living entity feel itching and happiness due to touch. So in material world, both are there. Itching is also there, happiness is also there because of that sense of touch in the skin. So 19. When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen, and thus the living entity can enjoy sex pleasure. 20. The evacuating channel separately became manifest, and the director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus, the living entities are able to pass stool and urine. So everything is important, right? It's not simply about eating. Then that also needs to be digested and it should be sent out. Otherwise, the person dies. So every small unit within the creation of the Lord is as important as everything else. It is not like that is important, but this is not important. Everything is very important. And the Lord is creating nicely everything for the living entity because he decided to be away from the Supreme Lord. So much austerity in one sense. I should not say that, but Lord is not under any austere situation. He's enjoying. But we should at least feel, oh, why the Lord is suffering, taking so much austerity for me that way. So I will end here. I'm sorry I went over by 4 minutes. I was supposed to finish by 7:30. Thank you all very much. If there are, I don't know if there is time for questions. Otherwise, we can close. Srihari, over to you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you, Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Mataji. Hare Krishna. So the programs will continue now.
I think it is over, Prabhu. I think it is over.
I was told, okay, you all started early, right? Okay.
Yeah, we have the Purushottam sadhana left still.
Okay.
We will be continuing with that.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your association, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Anusha Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Anusha Mataji, can you start the chapter 15